Cool. Um, Welcome. This is our first Rao Ranks kind of interview thing. We're just gonna have some discussion about Quiz Bowl in general and the Ohio Quiz Bowl scene, as well as other aspects regarding online Quiz Bowl and different opportunities within this academic sport. Um, with me, I have Tegan Capadia and Grant Majorana. Tegan, could you introduce yourself? Tell me who you are, what school you are affiliated with now and in the Ohio side of things, how long you've been a part of Ohio Quiz Bowl, and your favorite overall Quiz Bowl experience.
Yep, so my name is Tegan Capadia. I currently go to Georgia Tech. I'm a freshman there, and I went to high school at Beaver Creek, and I was part of the Quiz Bowl team there all 4 years, freshman through senior. And I think my favorite part of Quiz Bowl, specifically Ohio Quiz Bowl, is traveling to OAC states and regionals. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, OAC is definitely very interesting, very fun. Grant, now tell me, what school are you affiliated with, how long you've been a part of Ohio Quiz Bowl, and your general favorite Quiz Bowl experience?
I am Grant Majorana. I'm a senior at Solon High School in Northeast Ohio. And I've been participating in Quiz Bowl since I was in 8th grade. So this is my 5th year. And I'm looking to play in college, at least for the next couple of years. And my favorite Quiz Bowl experience is probably playing on last year's Ohio NASA team and making it all the way to the semifinals.
Sweet, sweet. Now, like, given your guys' perspectives, both like playing in the past couple of years, what are your current thoughts on like the Ohio Quiz Bowl scene? Like, who are the kind of big teams to look out for? Who are some, I guess, like some more underrated teams or things that people you see on the rise? I don't know. This is open, just kind of like.
Yeah, well, this year I think the top two, as it has been for a while, well, with the exception of some other schools that have come in and out, is just Solon and Beaver Creek.
Mm-hmm.
I think the state championship will like 99% go to one of those two teams. And I think we're split on the season in matchups. We may have one more win over them than they have over us, but that's just a classic Ohio rivalry, Solon and Beaver Creek. So yeah, that's kind of the top two in the state right now. And there's a pretty big drop off outside of that, but there's some other underrated teams like Solon B, Talawanda. Miami Valley has a pretty solid squad this year, so definitely lots of competition all throughout the state.
And Tegan, like, I know you've been like on the college side of things, but how, from like what you remember from last year and some kind of carryover players, like, do your, I guess, opinions and views kind of align with Grant's in that it's kind of Solon Beaver Creek at the top?
Yeah, I agree. When I was a freshman, I definitely think the competition was more diverse, at least from my perspective. There was Miami Valley, Beaver Creek, Solon, Dublin, Scioto, and Northmont, and so on. And I think as I progressed in high school, it became more and more, it converged to like being two teams. Like before it was like Beaver Creek and Miami Valley, and then after John Groger graduated, it started to be Beaver Creek and Solon, and that's how it is now.
Yeah. So going into, you mentioned John graduating, like, how do you think like solo players and people who like kind of really stand out all-stars, how their graduation has affected the programs that they've left behind? So we have like John and arguably William. We have Clark Smith and Eddie Liu with Dublin Scioto. How do you think that's kind of affected programs?
Well, I think there's definitely different impacts for different teams, because for my team, when Hari graduated, we were kind of like in his shadow for a while, but we were still able to like step up and be a strong team. But for teams like Dublin Scioto, when Clark Smith graduated, you could tell there was more of a drop off. And when John Groger graduated, it wasn't that much of a drop off, since William Groger was a very strong player as well. So there's different cases.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, out like how do you fare like Ohio as a kind of quiz bowl state? Like, some big states that come to mind are like Illinois and Texas and like California, and there's like the New York region. Where do you think Ohio stands in like the Midwest, as well as just overall in the nation as like a big quiz bowl state?
Well, first of all, I think Ohio is good because it has a state quiz bowl organization to begin with. A lot of states don't have that. So that really keeps the circuit alive and doing well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just the existence of like OAC and all of the work that, you know, Greg Bosick and others do with like promoting Quiz Bowl and the more, you know, rural or less urban regions of the state has gone a long way in promoting and prolonging Quiz Bowl. But besides just the, you know, the perennial powerhouses that always exist, there's,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of work that has been done in, you know, adding new schools to the circuit over the
Mhm.
past few years.
How do you see OAC as like OAC as a format? Where do you kind of place that or regard that when compared to like kind of standard like NAQT or ACF rulings? Like, do you feel like the competitions act as something like kind of secondary or something, provide a different set of skills or challenges, or is it part of the greater whole?
To me, I've always liked OIC. I think it's just, you know, it's more quizable, so there's nothing wrong with that. But it can be a little quirky, and you know, it's just a slightly different game than standard quizable. But I yeah, I think, you know, the amount of new writers that they've had over the past few years, and like just bringing in more people to the local committees and things have, you know, done a good job of, you know, bringing OAC up to speed, so to speak. But yeah, I enjoy OAC, and I think it does a good job of, you know, promoting Quiz Bowl throughout the state.
Yeah.
Yeah. To add on to that, I do really like OAC's format in that it encourages like more teamwork since you can collaborate on pretty much, yeah, literally every single question. And
Hmm.
the lightning round, or not the lightning, the alphabet round, I thought that was a pretty inventive thing. That's always fun to do.
Yeah, I like how the alphabet, like it, you don't see much like kind of a written aspect to Quiz Bowl as you do see in like other kind of competitions and academic like ventures. So it's interesting to have that and kind of incorporate it with that more team style. Um, yeah, OAC is a definitely a very interesting format. Um,
Yeah, I also enjoy just like the you know, the regional to state structure,
mhm,
like where you can't just qualify from any random tournament. You have to, you know, be one of the top teams in your region, which, you know, it kind of hurts some of the teams that are in slightly stronger regions, like in the southwest of the state. But I don't know, it's interesting to play against some of those more local schools that we don't get to see a lot, and
mhm,
you know, have that sort of regional divided aspect to it is something that we don't really get otherwise.
yeah. Um, as you were talking about kind of like kind of regional representation and kind of getting that play, that level of play that we don't normally get to see in like um, more NAQT and ACF kind of style um, tournaments and events. How do you think the shift to like online quiz bowl and like how do you think the pandemic has affected kind of smaller schools and like regions who were kind of like um, underpopulated or like heavily dominated by one or two schools?
I can take this one. So I definitely think it hurts some schools, but after some time, I think Ohio Quiz Bowl adjusted pretty well. They had a system down of using Google Meet, using the set score sheets, and eventually I think that got everyone back in the way of things.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think the individuals that spearheaded online quiz bowl last year really helped keep it alive, especially you know, keep it open to everyone in the state, not just the top teams. You know, Joshua Eck from Copley, you know, the creator of the X score sheets and like the whole Google Meet system, and then Greg Bosick did a good job of keeping all of his, you know, outreach going on through the pandemic. So I think thanks to those individuals, we didn't really have that much of um, a decrease in quiz bowl
Yeah.
activities last year as one would have anticipated.
Mhm. Now, I kind of want to circle back to Tegan. You were talking about playing for Georgia Tech as a freshman. Now, how has college quiz bowl kind of slotted into your like overall college experience?
I think it's nice to have something familiar when you go to college, and the fact that Ari from my school, he's there, that makes it better and more familiar. And yeah, it's definitely a more relaxed environment, and I think I enjoy Quiz Bowl uh, a lot more when there's not as much stakes into it, and you can just go and have fun.
Mm, yeah. Um, and Grant, you were talking about how like you were um, hoping to play Quiz Bowl in college and kind of pursue that for a couple of years. Has it kind of affected the schools you've looked at, or how big would you think it kind of like contributes to the college like selection process?
I've definitely considered like the for the schools that I've applied to, whether or not they have quiz bowl, and for the most part, all of them do. So, um, you know, if they all have a club, that's kind of just what I'm looking for. Just like having a place like where I can go spend time and meet people right off the bat is kind of what's most important to me. I'm not really looking to go and win ICT my freshman year. So um, yeah, it seems like most of the schools have a club, so that's about all that I need right now.
Sweet. Kind of hope to touch upon this with Mr. Benedict as well, but I guess we can just kind of get straight to like talking about NASAT. Now I've heard like NASAT thrown around a lot, but it was kind of hard to kind of learn a little bit more without like some further research. So like, could you guys give like a kind of brief description of NASAT, like in your own words?
Sure. So NASAT is like the all-star version of Quiz Bowl. So each state will form one or more teams, and it's basically state versus state. The best players from each state face off in like a national championship sort of thing. And there's a whole tryout process and all that. And Mr. Bandic is the one who's been running that, and we're very grateful that he continued to do it last year despite it being online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how when compared to like other national tournaments like PACE and like HSNCT, how does the difficulty and like how does the difficulty and the composition of like the teams, how does that affect or like change the NASAT experience rather than like those kind of broader national tournaments?
Well, the questions are certainly like a huge step harder than PACE or HSNCT, but that's balanced out by the fact that the teams are pulled from entire states. So yeah, it was just a fun experience to play on such harder questions, but also play against a lot stronger opponents than you usually would. So yeah, NASAT is very different in that aspect from other nationals.
I see. So how does the tryout process like typically work? At least in the Ohio like uh, stretch of things.
So I only did it last year, but it seems to be there's like 2 or 3 rounds of tryouts, and then there's stats and buzz points compiled from those. And Mr. Bandic like makes decisions based on that. And there's definitely more of an emphasis on depth within a category because you want to compose the ideal team that can have deep coverage in all categories over rather than like having one person that has good knowledge over a lot of things.
Gotcha. So it's a lot of like specialization, and that's favored over general kind of good knowledge.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's something that Ohio has a lot of, is like just players that don't have a lot of support around them, so they have to generalize. And like the past few years, like players from Copley or Aurora or teams like that, like Bexley, from a few years ago. Like you didn't see a lot of those players on NASAT because, there was a larger need for stronger specialists. So you would see like the fourth scorer from Solon or Beaver Creek being on the team in favor of just a generalist like that. So that's something that Mr. Benedict also takes into account.
Gotcha. What was the practice schedule like once you actually like got onto the tryout, like past the tryouts and got onto like the team?
I think it was generally once a week practice. We were pretty flexible with timing based on things that came up now and then. Yeah, so.
Yeah,
and
and with a team like that small, I think there are only like 5 of us last year. So yeah, we just kind of scheduled things when we could and heard some questions, which was good preparation.
do you think it's realistic for Ohio to send 2 teams to NASA this year? Or do you think we probably stay to the one like we did last year?
I mean, if you look at last year, like, and then you look at the amount of talent that graduated, I don't think it's really feasible to run 2 teams this year, just based on the amount of players that we have. So, yeah, I think 1 team is the way to go for now.
Gotcha.
Obviously, that's up to Mr. Benedict.
So how do you think NASAT, do you think NASAT fares well or better being hosted online, or do you think like, how do you think that experience is, given that NASAT will be held online this year as well? How does that kind of affect the overall experience of playing a high level tournament like that?
So on one hand, NASAT being online means more people can play it and at less cost because there's no travel involved. On the other hand, it makes it harder to like enjoy it since you may not be able to like assemble the whole team in one place. Like last year, we had it split into 2 places where the Solon people were together and the people from my region were all together. So it could have been worse. So I think that was a pretty good setup. But yeah, online NASA definitely makes it more accessible, in my opinion.
Yeah, and especially with the places NASA has been hosted in the past, like it's been close to Fred Moreland in Kentucky at some points, and then it was at OSU once, I think. So that's not, very central or easy to get to for a lot of teams, especially from, the West Coast. So yeah, I think online helped with the accessibility, but a lot of the fun of like the big national tournaments like that is just like the experience of being around so many quiz bowlers at the same time. So that's something that was kind of lost last year, but obviously the main point is just run the competition and see who wins.
Yeah. All right. So we already kind of talked a little bit about how important and like how kind of groundbreaking that shift from kind of in-person quiz bowl to online quiz bowl has affected the environment and like the scene. But like, how do you think that has kind of changed the depth and like I guess practice schedule and the rigor of like certain teams? I ask because we've all had experience with online practices over like Discord or other platforms in the past like year and a half, 2 years. How do you think that online shift has affected the skill level and power of teams across the state and just in the nation?
I think something that we saw like at the very start of the pandemic was like the like quarantine grind, where like a bunch of people just got really good really quick, or they were just biking the whole time, but we'll never know. Yeah, so that was kind of one thing. And then I could see that like in a lot of teams where the quiz bowl program isn't super strong, I could see them just like not existing during the pandemic and like with online practices. In stronger programs like Solon, our coach was very good at transitioning to online and keeping us running and making sure we had enough tournaments and things like that. But I don't think that was the reality for a lot of teams, and especially in Ohio, like a lot of teams rely on their local league
Mhm.
for their regular season stuff. So, and some of that wasn't happening last year.
Yeah, I agree. And also that for more established teams that, especially for my team, it led to a rise in like more informal student-led online practices that can be a bit more flexible since you don't have to come in person.
Mhm. And I like that you mentioned league and how that kind of like how that kind of sometimes can be the primary source of Quiz Bowl like activity and play for teams. Um, do you think it's like feasible to run an online kind of league? And like how accessible do you think um, online Quiz Bowl could be to the overall like I guess Ohio scene, especially to kind of boost Quiz Bowl play and interest in some of those underrepresented regions?
Um, I definitely there were online leagues last year, but I think for a lot of the teams where Quiz Bowl for them just means like going to X school on a Tuesday night and playing 4 rounds of Quiz Bowl, that was probably a tough transition for them just because that was what they knew as like their tradition. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think online leagues can be feasible for leagues that are really hardcore, but otherwise in person is the way to go.
Gotcha.
Additionally, if the league is using OAC, then that makes it a bit more challenging to do online because then you can't collaborate really
Yeah,
without the other team here.
yeah. Um, do you do you see the benefits and like kind of we saw like a really big like I guess upsurge and like uptick in online Quiz Bowl and online run programs and events. Like we have the rise of the like AQBL through the pandemic and stuff like that. Do you see um, as the pandemic kind of progresses and like we hopefully kind of transition out of it and do you see that kind of persisting online Quiz Bowl, or do you think the benefits and experience of in person greatly outweigh the pros of online?
I mean, AQBL was able to do like tons of outreach last year where they would just email every school in Rhode Island and see, how many teams they could get. So, but they definitely reached a lot of teams, but I don't know if those teams are, going to have a continued presence in Quiz Bowl. Um, I just think in-person events are more likely to, hook teams and have them come back and want to compete again, much more than online, especially with all the like technology problems and stuff that were common in Quiz Bowl last year. I just think
Mhm.
in person is a lot more inviting for new teams.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I wanted to ask um, as a kind of like um, I guess continued question from like increasing like knowledge and increasing depth because of the online you were talking because of the online kind of shift you were talking about that quarantine grind and like how do you think the I guess resources and um, more accessible levels of like questions and I guess pre-existing like Quizbo, I guess like bots and like websites. How do you think that's affected the environment and like Quizbo atmosphere?
Tegan, do you have anything for this?
Well, I can definitely say that bots have become way more popular. Like they're in almost every Quizable server now. And I also noticed that there's definitely a lot more scrimming, like online scrimming in Discord than there was before the pandemic. So I guess that's good for motivation and healthy competition for some teams.
Yeah, and I think like the shift to online and it really gave an advantage to the people that knew about the resources and had access to them, like people that were connected to Quiz Bowl Discord or knew about like QuizDB and Protable, etc. I think those teams got a lot better over the pandemic, while teams that studied in other ways or practiced traditionally in person, maybe they had a bit of a drop off. So I think there's kind of an increase in the disparity between the top of the top and the average team.
Mhm. And Tegan, you were talking about how like more informal and student-led practices had kind of risen through the pandemic. How do you think that changes the kind of position of like a coach or like a kind of teacher or like advisor within Quiz Bowl? Like,
So I think that depends a lot on if the teacher is familiar with Discord or other technologies through which they can do practice. And if they're not, then that definitely shifts more responsibility onto whoever the team leader is to keep things going.
yeah, I mean, we've been seeing a lot of like these kind of student-led organizations or student-led kind of like insular events and things like that, I guess, rising in more established programs. And sometimes creating their own things. We talked about AQBL with like how that's like a largely kind of student-based organization acting in like a capacity similar to like NAQT or like PACE. How, I don't know, I just lost my train of thought. I don't know. Do you think like it's kind of supplanted the need for like greater kind of administrative help with like a teacher? Do you think like that the student leader has kind of completely overtaken the role of over like the role of a coach in like stronger programs? Or do you think there's like a world for both? There's like needs for both parties?
I definitely think there's needs for both because some schools, I think for most schools, the school is the one that provides transportation to like local things. They also provide the funding. So you definitely need a coach to like as a liaison between the club and the school.
Mhm.
Yeah, because like last year, for a team that was very Quizbowl savvy, like if we wanted to play a tournament, we would just, find it online, DM the TD, tell them we wanted to play, Venmo them some money, and that was it. But in person, like with, formal registration and as Tegan said, like getting the transportation and the funding, you definitely need an adult leader for that. So I think as things shift back in person, we'll definitely see a lot more advisor involvement going forward.
Mhm. Now, here comes like the big, like really kind of ambiguous question. Do you guys prefer online or in-person Quiz Bowl? And like what kind of comes to mind like instantly for like either side of
Well,
pros cons?
I'll say that I definitely enjoy in-person quiz bowl as most people do, but that might be because the programs I've been involved in have been pretty well established and they would do well, whether it was online or in person in terms of like finding tournaments and going to tournaments. And the experience of going to tournaments and playing with your friends is definitely better when it's in person. And I think when it's online, we try to mimic that by all assembling in one location, just spending the whole day together, playing a quiz bowl, and then just hanging out when we're not in rounds and so on.
Yeah, I think like online Quiz Bowl versus in-person Quiz Bowl is kind of analogous to like online school versus in-person school, because like during the pandemic, I didn't really realize that like how much like I was just socially involved with people at school, and like that was my only source of interaction with those people, and that I didn't really talk to them outside of school. So it's sort of sort of similar to how it works in Quiz Bowl, where um, if you're just playing tournaments online, you don't really get the interaction like before, after, and during the tournament, and those relationships that you build. Yeah, you don't really get that when you're just playing online, and also with interacting with other teams and making friends throughout the circuit.
Yep.
You don't really get that online either.
Mhm. do you have any like kind of tips on like kind of fostering that like um quiz bowl community, or like any kind of baseline words of advice for those trying to develop a smaller kind of quiz bowl program?
You definitely want to have, a friendly relationship with everyone in your club, and you want that to be like a place where people want to, be social. Um, and that really helps people, want to come back to practice and then, start getting better. Um, and yeah, just make it a place where, everyone can get along. And yeah, that's about all I have.
As for the making friends throughout the circuit, I think it's important that when you go to tournaments, you'll see the same people over and over. So you should like try to talk to them, like at least like basic stuff, and get to know them, like the coaches, the players you play against. Because if you're for in Ohio Quiz Bowl, you'll see them at every single tournament. So at least when it's in person, it's
Yeah,
important to build that connection.
yeah, I think it's really good that Ohio's like both really regional, but also like kind of diverse. So you have a lot of familiar faces you can see kind of rotate event for event, but it still feels kind of tight knit, and like it's a community that's really easy to get familiar with. And there's a lot of really like friendly faces and fun people to meet all throughout the circuit.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I like how the coaches have like their own network, and a lot of the coaches, regularly communicate with each other and coordinate things, and that kind of transfers into, the students, reaching out to each other more. So that's something that we have in Ohio that's pretty beneficial.
um, Now, do you have any like final kind of like tips or tricks aimed towards like newer and kind of perspective quiz bowl players, those who are trying to kind of like improve and are interested but don't know where to go?
I would say just, get out there and play as much as you can. It's difficult like right now because we're kind of in between like things being fully online and things being fully in person. But just, play as much as you can within reason. Of course, it's sometimes with newer programs, it's hard to get funding or transportation, but it just, expose you and your club to, as much quiz bowl as you can.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you like it, then you should get as much experience as you can, because a lot of the skill comes from experience alone outside of like dedicated study.
Mhm. Any like, I know, final kind of like thoughts, um, questions, things you guys want to like talk about?
When is Rao Ranks dropping?
Good question. We have we're probably going to do a write up closer to Ohio State's, and something in line with kind of pre-nationals and like the teams that are going to SSNCT and the teams that are going to HSNCT or PACE. We'll kind of like talk about them, rank them. We're currently in the works with developing ELO rankings for kind of large Ohio scale events. And it's largely Ohio centric. I'm kind of like the chief worker on that at the moment. And so right now we're working on Ohio based events and events where a lot of Ohio teams have played. So like Hicksville, Northmont, Tippecanoe, and we are including kind of out of state teams in these calculations to keep it fair and like relatively accurate. However, we won't be tracking if like an Ohio team like Northmont goes to out of state tournaments to compete, just to keep it kind of on a fair scale and a fair base. So just to kind of even the playing field and give another kind of way of seeing where teams are at, we're working on ELO rankings. So those should be released somewhere in the middle of March. as something kind of current, but that's where we're at with Rao Ranks. We're hoping to do some more interviews, talk to some more alumni, coaches, and current players in order to just kind of get some outreach, talk to different people in different regions, and amplify the interest in Quiz Bowl, both in state and out of state. So yeah.
Can you tell us who Rao is and what is his role in this organization?
Rao is Prahalad Rao, who is the namesake of our organization. He is our head statistician, and he works on most of our, we work together. It's a really tight-knit group of me, Rohan Navanitha, Shorjo Ganguly of Beaver Creek High School, and Prahalad Rao. And we work on both the statistics side and kind of quantifying tournament results, and trying to quantitatively rank and analyze the teams in the Ohio Quiz Bowl scene, as well as provide a more communicative and like kind of outreach and interconnected social side of things. So that's what these interviews and that's what these are aimed to I guess appease, words.
Okay.
Sweet. It's been wonderful talking to you guys. I hope you guys have a great day, and keep on buzzing. I don't know.
All right. Thank you for having
Good,
us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
figure out
thank
an
you.
outro or something.
Yeah.
Probably should have planned that beforehand, but all right. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.